Great. So here we are in New York City. Actually, this is Brooklyn. This is Domino Park, which is by the Williamsburg Bridge that you can see here. For those of you who haven't been to New York before or aren't super familiar, I'll just give a moment of orientation. If we look at this map down here, we can see where we are by the Williamsburg Bridge. This land mass here is a part of the Manhattan Island, and down here is Statue of Liberty, a famous landmark. So we are over on the east side in Brooklyn. So today I'm going to be presenting a work in progress so far on my SloMoCo micro-residency project. I've been studying the infrastructures that have emerged in New York since the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And I am focusing in particular on outdoor dining. I have led walking tours in real life in Manhattan. And I have also led walking tours in virtual reality. But this is kind of today a new experiment in finding a digital walking tour format. It's been inspired by Emma Norton and the Inside, Outside, Inside group. So I'd like to thank them for inspiration and also invite you to participate in this first iteration of an experiment in a new format. So let's go back to Domino Park. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, or my project was motivated by the question of, since the COVID-19 pandemic started, what new objects, forms, and technologies now mediate our public spaces? I've been in New York for the duration of the pandemic, and for a time there wasn't much to do besides walk around, if that at all. And so I spent a lot of time just noticing things. Since the pandemic has started, you've probably noticed changes in your built environment in public spaces as well. And I'm going to be speaking about my experience in New York City, but I know that other cities have responded similarly. For example, in New York, we have open streets where the streets are closed either all the time or certain days of the week. There are signs almost everywhere saying to remain 6 feet apart, and there's stickers on the ground telling you where to line up to get your coffee or where to stand on public transportation. And this park, I started us here in Domino Park because it kind of became iconic, or I guess famous, for these circles that were drawn on the ground showing people where to sit on the grass to stay away from, keep a distance from one another. And so we can start to see here already, we get a sense of the various forms and materials that have been used to change and guide our movements in public spaces. Encasements and barricades, stickers, signs, and paint. And as the pandemic has progressed, a lot of people have talked about this. There have been dozens of articles about the future of cities, what will happen to them, if we will even have cities in the future. And what the pandemic has done is brought a lot of conversations in many areas of our life and society to the forefront and accelerated them. And the future of cities, is one of those conversations. This conversation was already ongoing though. Just as reference, I wanted to share in 2019, Sidewalk Labs, which is a urban technology company owned by Alphabet, published a couple podcast episodes that are relevant to this project. The first was one on responsive architecture. And this is like architecture that changes based on the weather. And the other one was what they call STOA, or flexible mixed-use public spaces. These are using like very advanced, expensive technologies and materials, and with a very top-down approach coming out of Silicon Valley. and big tech. But what I find exciting about this moment now is that we're seeing these kinds of infrastructures emerge from the bottom up. And we can see these now documented on Google Street View. So I'm going to take us to another place where we can see them. We're going to go a little bit south down to Vanderbilt Street. And we're going to zoom in right here. And we'll look around. Okay. So the writers of the book Urban Code, 100 Lessons for Understanding the City, say that, quote, cities are made of scenes, and those scenes have syntax. Googling syntax, you'll find the definition as the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. So in terms of the language of cities, their book is really aiming to outline urban codes for how to read a particular neighborhood in Manhattan or like district called Soho. These are things like that seem relatively simple, but to put together create these scenes, such as people walk on the sunny side of the street. So these codes are therefore ways to understand the city. And for my project, the scene I'm focusing on understanding the syntax of is outdoor dining. And I'm asking, what are the codes that make up the syntax of these spaces? To help break these scenes down further, I've been looking at work from another city scholar as a launching off point. The 1960 book, Image of the City by Kevin Lynch breaks the city into 5 forms that he explains contribute to what he calls imageability, which is basically the ability to create a cohesive mental map. And then he examines how they relate to one another and how they can be designed and create a cohesive whole. So these 5 forms are paths, edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks. My study isn't so much interested in the imageability in the same sense that Kevin Lynch was interested in it for navigation purposes. But I have focused my first few observations on new edges and paths that are emerging in our public spaces. And these are forms that you are probably used to by now. I've been doing my first few observations in Brooklyn in the neighborhoods of Bed-Stuy and Clinton Hill and Fort Greene so far, if you're familiar with the area. And observing these sites, so far I've identified 6 edges that make up new paths that we are moving through in the pandemic. And these are not new materials, but used to signify new concepts and are coming together to create new public forms that we can read. So this is also not exhaustive. I'm just starting this process, but I'm sharing so far what I have been observing. So the 6 forms that I've taken a closer look at are barricades, fabric, lights, reflectors, wood, and plants. The architect Bernard Tschumi is famous for saying that, quote, architecture is the materialization of the concept. And if we accept that statement and dig into the process of the concepts becoming materials, I wanted to ask here, what do these new edges and paths tell us about the concepts they embody? In my other job, I'm an interaction designer, and I think this is particularly or partially why I've been so fascinated by these new sites. These outdoor dining structures were built in response to the question, how do you keep people safe, meaning reduce the likelihood of the spread of COVID COVID-19 virus between people by keeping them apart in outdoor ventilated areas all through design. And on top of that, what technologies or urban media can we use in a dense city environment quickly and in variable weather conditions? So these structures are DIY, they're built with readily available materials, they're responsive to their environment, they're also creative and unique while working within city regulations. And so these are the concepts that we are seeing realized in these forms. In these structures, we are seeing the materialization of an emergency, and the paths, these are the paths, these paths are the borders between safety and danger. These structures are remaking our cities and our interactions in them in a way I think will extend beyond outdoor dining as we move forward. Over the course of the spring, I am going to continue observations of more sites, kind of expanding my radius, hopefully. And the question I would like to dig into next with these is what new movements and interaction patterns are emerging. So thank you. That's it. We can let these play out if we want, but that's everything I wanted to share with you.